You know, for decades, the whole world thought capitalism was communism's #1 enemy. But what if the real story, the most dangerous story, was about communists turning on each other? Yeah, let's get into this, because the biggest threat to the whole Red Revolution wasn't the West at all. It was the insane rivalry between its two biggest players. And boy, does that quote hit the nail on the head. You see, the Cold War, it was never just a two-player game. This one sentence just perfectly captures the toxic, paranoid, and almost fatal relationship between the Soviet Union and Mao's China. A relationship that came this close to ending in nuclear fire.
All right, so let's set the stage a bit. It's 1950. World War II is over, and you've got these two communist giants on the world stage. The old guard, the Soviet Union, and the brand new People's Republic of China. I mean, on paper, they should have been best friends, right? The perfect allies.
I mean, just look at the resume, right? Both were born from these incredibly bloody revolutions. Both survived foreign occupation, and both had this deep, outspoken hatred for capitalism and imperialism. This should have been it, the perfect foundation for a global workers' paradise, this unbreakable red wall against the West. And they even made it official with the Sino-Soviet Treaty of Friendship. We're talking billions in loans from the USSR, technical experts to help build up Chinese industry, top-of-the-line military hardware, the whole deal. It really looked like the Soviets were taking their new, younger brother under their wing. But the cracks started showing almost right away. So when Mao Zedong, the victorious revolutionary leader of China, shows up in Moscow, he's expecting a hero's welcome. But instead, Stalin just leaves him cooling his heels at a guest house for weeks. Just think about that. It's like being left on red by the architect of the Great Terror. This was a total calculated power play. And that humiliation, Mao never forgot it. It was the very first sign that this was not a partnership of equals. No way. In Stalin's mind, he was the undisputed king of communism. And Mao, well, Mao was just another subject. So when Stalin finally agrees to meet Mao, he attaches all these strings to the treaty, demands that basically kept Soviet influence firmly planted on Chinese soil. He was treating China less like a comrade and more like a colony. The so-called friendship was already a mess before the ink was even dry. Okay, so Stalin dies in 1953. You might think, hey, maybe things will get better now. No, you would be dead wrong, because those early personal insults were about to explode into a full-blown ideological war. This was what Mao saw as the great betrayal of the revolution. And here's the bombshell. The new Soviet leader, Nikita Khrushchev, gives this secret speech denouncing Stalin's crimes, and it sent shockwaves through the entire communist world. But for Mao, this wasn't just about trashing Stalin's legacy. Oh no. To him, it was Khrushchev turning his back on the very heart of revolutionary communism. Now, to you and me, these ideological differences might seem kinda minor, splitting hairs, right? But to a true believer like Mao, they were everything. Say, Mao wanted total global confrontation with the West, full stop. Khrushchev, on the other hand, starts talking about peaceful coexistence. Khrushchev was being a pragmatist, Mao was a purist. And this is what led to the ultimate betrayal, at least in Mao's eyes. He desperately wanted a nuclear bomb to make China a true global power. But the Soviets, they flat out refused to share their nuclear secrets. And why? Because they wanted to keep China dependent, to keep them on a very, very short leash.
The message from the USSR was crystal clear. China was a useful ally, but it would never be an equal. Always the sidekick, never the main character. And for a guy like Mao, that was absolutely intolerable. So China said, fine, we'll build our own bomb. And that's when the alliance really started to fall apart.
So the ideological breakup was bad enough. But now this communist family feud was about to get bloody. It was about to turn into a real shooting war. And all it took was one tiny, insignificant little piece of land to push them right to the edge of Armageddon. Yeah, this is Zhenbao Island. It's strategically worthless, totally useless. But, you know, like in any really messy breakup, it wasn't about the thing they were fighting over. It was about what it represented. For China, this island was a symbol of 100 years of being pushed around by Russia. This was their chance to finally stand up for themselves. So, in the lead-up to the fighting, the Soviets were not messing around. They moved 375,000 troops to the board. We're talking aircraft, missiles, the works. But China's response? It was just staggering. They put 1.5 million soldiers on their side of the border. Just like that, This remote, forgotten frontier became one of the most heavily militarized zones on the entire planet.
And then, in March of 1969, the whole thing just blew up. Chinese forces launched a planned ambush, killing 31 Soviet border guards. The Soviets retaliated with absolutely overwhelming force. We're talking tanks, armored carriers, and just raining down tens of thousands of artillery shells. The whole conflict was spiraling completely out of control.
And this is how serious it got. The Soviet leadership, the Politburo, they started actively discussing a preemptive nuclear strike, just wiping out China's new nuclear program before it could even get off the ground. Think about that. The two biggest communist nations on Earth were on the verge of nuking each other. Thankfully, cooler heads prevailed in the end. The two sides managed to negotiate a ceasefire, but the damage was done. The world had been changed forever. The fallout from this near miss would completely shatter the old rules of the Cold War and draw a brand new map of global power.
The consequences were just massive. I mean, first off, the whole myth of a single unified communist world, gone, shattered. Second, the Cold War wasn't just USA versus USSR anymore. It was now a three-way game, USA versus the USSR versus China. And this allowed the US, under Richard Nixon, to make a brilliant move, playing the two rivals against each other. That historic visit to Beijing in '72, it opened the door for China's rise to the superpower it is today.
And this all leads to the ultimate irony, the great reversal. Back in the 60s, the Soviet Union was the big dog, the senior partner, and China was the junior. But today, it has completely flipped. Russia is now deeply dependent on the very same country it once treated like its lapdog. So what about today? Well, yes, on the surface, they present this unified front against the West. They talk about their no-limits partnership. But that history, a history of humiliation, betrayal, and coming inches from nuclear war, that doesn't just vanish. That deep-seated mistrust is baked right into the relationship. And that leaves us with one final, very important question. With Russia busy in Ukraine and China eyeing Taiwan, this alliance of convenience works for now. But if history has taught us anything, it's that this partnership is fragile. So you have to wonder, are these friends destined to become tomorrow's rivals all over again?